Welcome to Learning Unlocked. I am your host, Brit Bingold. As an instructional specialist in Gilbert, Arizona, I am a total nerd when it comes to classroom strategies and educational pedagogy. Educators are the key holders to unlocking learning for students. Today, as always, my goal is to provide you with resources and tools, the keys, to enable and accelerate learning for all students. Thanks for joining me today. Let's get started. Before we get going on the interview today, I just wanted to do a quick reminder that if you have time to rate us and write us a review on Apple Podcasts, we would appreciate it. The more reviews and ratings we get, the more educators will see our podcast. So if you like what you're hearing and you think others would too, please head over and provide us a review. Thanks. Hey key holders, welcome to episode 15 of Learning Unlocked. Today my guest is also my inspiring colleague, Wendy S. Peterson. On today's episode, we really dig into what truly cultivates a credible teacher and how discovering the facets of teacher credibility expanded our own knowledge as teachers and instructional specialists. It also gave us more ideas and tools to help teachers who struggle with engaging instruction and classroom management. I can't wait for you guys to listen to this interview, and I hope that after the interview is over, you take some time to reflect on your own teaching practices and what really makes you credible as a teacher. Enjoy the interview with Wendy. Hey Wendy, how are you doing today?
I'm awesome. Thank you.
I am so glad you're able to join me. I know this is a busy time at work, but I am ready to talk about cultivating credibility as a teacher with you. But first, for those listeners that don't know, we do work together in the same office. We're instructional specialists.
Yay!
And we both Yay, I know, it's so exciting. Well, eventually I'll get to the office.
Right.
But right now I'm quarantined, but one day we'll get there. But we both have this love of Hamilton, and we both love Broadway musicals. So can you tell our listeners what are some of your favorite Broadway shows?
Well, I absolutely love musicals. I was raised on them. The problem with your question is that it depends on my mood. And so I have, if I need serious or funny, but if I had to, I mean, Hamilton's kind of a given. I think it's brilliant. I saw Chicago on Broadway when I was 12, and so it has remained one of my top favorites. And with students, even when I'm teaching teachers, I have been known to break into song like, "Come on, babe, why don't we paint the town?" And everybody's like, "She's singing."
See, and I wish they would all go, and all that jazz.
Right? Exactly. If I ever have a really great group, they'll do that. So yeah, and I sometimes tell people, okay, name a musical, and not the newer musicals, it's Hamilton. Name a musical, and I will sing a song from it. So it's one of my lesser known talents, but one I'm pretty darn proud of, and one I actually do use when I teach. So
Yeah, I think it really encompasses a lot of your personality, and that's why I wanted you to kind of share that with the listeners, especially
yeah,
because go ahead. Especially because we're going to be talking about dynamism later.
right. Yeah.
And so I just thought that would be a great kind of segue in for sure.
Yeah, I've been known to break into song and dance, but if you're listening out there, you don't have to. This is not a podcast about me teaching you how to break into song and dance.
No, and actually, but if you feel like you ever want to with your students, that's also okay.
Do. Right.
So let the listeners know, what is your little bio, education-wise?
Absolutely. So this is my 35th year in education, I think. I started in 1986.
Yes, I know that because of a lot of reasons that I'm not going to share in this podcast.
Oh, all righty then. So this is my 30th. 35th or 36th year in education. I am a fourth generation Arizona teacher. Both my parents are teachers. My grandma was a teacher, and even my great grandmother was a teacher right here in the Valley. All, by the way, graduates of ASU. So I taught in the classroom in Mesa for 26 years. During some of that time, about 6 years, I was doing professional growth and teaching. And then I moved over here to Gilbert. And then the last 3 years, I have been 100% focused on um, helping teachers be the very best teachers they can be. So it's my passion, and I'm so excited that as I come toward the end of my career, I get to do what I love the most, other than sing and dance.
Well, and I just love that I get to work and learn from you, um, because this is only my 13th year in education. And so I feel like, you know, coming into professional growth with not extreme that, I mean, it's not like a not in a lot about amount of experience, but I just get to learn a lot from you of how you treat teachers and how you can and you mentor teachers, and I've loved watching that and learning that from you. So I really appreciate all of your experience and bringing all of your experience to the podcast today.
Well, thank you so much. And what I know for sure is that we have to continue to pass good teaching down generation to generation. And so here I do feel like I get to pass it on to you and to Julia and to teachers throughout the district as my time officially in education begins to wind down. And I know my mom did the same thing and my grandma did the same thing too. So it is of utmost importance that we continue to assist those who will continue on in this field after we head out.
I love that. I love that so much. Okay, so that kind of leads in perfectly to our first question, which is you have visited many classrooms over your 35 years in education. Like you said, you've been an instructional coach, a mentor, a specialist, even when you were teaching. When you notice a teacher is struggling with classroom management, what do you find to be the root of the management issue?
Well, first of all, it's a great question. And most often, uh, we are called in for, quote, I'm using air quotes, management problems.
Right.
What I have, right, what I have found is that it isn't so much management as it is instruction. Now, before I go on and talk more about that, it could be management. You obviously have to set up rules and procedures. You need to teach them to the students. The students need to learn them like they would learn anything else in your classroom. They need to practice them. They need to be held accountable for them. All of that is absolutely true. But the majority of the time, if I go into a classroom where there are issues, the teacher has at least some semblance of that as part of the classroom routine. So as I sit to watch to diagnose, what becomes abundantly clear is that the instruction is not as strong as it could be. And the sad thing is that students are misbehaving or acting out because they're bored. Now, I hate the word bored. Growing up, I was not allowed to use it, and my parents didn't allow that word in our home. So I don't like the word bored, and I don't think it's a good excuse for misbehavior. But frankly, and this is just terrible, but sometimes I sit in a class and think, I'm bored to tears. If I were 8, I would really be bored. Or if I'm in an English class, I think, I love English. I love this story. Oh, I am dying of boredom. No wonder the kids are acting out. And so then what it really does come to is the instruction and the teachers teaching well and with this credibility that we're going to get into more lately. So we have to remember that our students, and I don't care if they're kindergartners or seniors in high school, they are struggling with impulse control. Those brains haven't totally developed yet. And so when they're not engaged in a lesson or interested in a lesson, that's when they're misbehaving. And if the whole class is bored or not engaged, then that's when it looks like the teacher has a classroom management problem instead of an instruction issue.
Yeah, so a lot of it boils down to how engaging is your instruction? And we're not even talking about all that jazz. I mean, part of it is that, right?
Right.
But
For me,
well, and for me, um,
right,
but not for everyone. But
correct.
part of it is making sure that your instruction is engaging in a way that is, maybe makes them critically think or makes them question or have inquiry or, any of those things are engaging to students. It doesn't mean necessarily you're doing a song and dance up front, but you're not keeping you're keeping them in that sweet spot, right? We talked about yesterday where they're not bored, they're not stressed, but they are definitely intrigued and engaged in what you're doing. They have some curiosity for sure. Okay. So I like that you talked about the word bored. I have that with my kids too. I'm like, no, we can't say bored because we've got so many options and things to do. And so go ahead and try to figure out what you can do if you think you're bored. And I feel like a lot of times for my own personal kids, boredom breeds curiosity and creativity at my house. Um, and we don't allow that of our students. We expect that a lot of teachers expect them to sit, be quiet, and listen. So that doesn't, I mean, they are bored, but they're not necessarily being asked to extend that into something creative.
Right. Well, and as we go out into schools, we also talk about the fact that what are the kids doing and not doing. So if I go into a classroom and the kids are just sitting for 5 minutes, 10 minutes in the upper grades, sometimes the whole hour, then the teacher needs to figure out what students should be doing. And again, that will help with those management issues.
Yeah, for sure. So most teachers, I think, well, hopefully, see themselves as credible, right? They have a
I hope.
degree in education. They're well versed in their content, their knowledge, their standards, hopefully, and what skills the kids need to be using or learning for them to be successful in life. But we, however, know that credibility truly lies in the perception that the students have of the teacher. So, why is the student's perception of the teacher's credibility so essential in addition to inspiring instruction, like you were talking about?
Well, first of all, it's a hard pill to swallow sometimes, but perception is everything. I can think I'm a lovely, kind, gracious, fun person. I believe whole heart, but if nobody else believes it, it doesn't work. And so, whether we like how students perceive us or not, or whether we think that they're perceiving us correctly, it, none of that matters. The reality is that how they see us is everything. In fact, I can't stress this enough. I used to talk about it actually with students. That's how strongly I feel about it. So students would say to me, and we usually did this during reading a short story or something, but they would say to me, well, it's not fair that people would perceive me differently if I have piercings or tattoos or funny hair color. And I'm like, you are absolutely right. That is not fair. However, it is reality. So you can still have all those things. I don't care, but you have to be able to take the consequences of that. So taking this back to teachers, I can believe that I am a good teacher, that I know my stuff, that I care about students. But if I'm not allowing them to see those things, if they don't believe I'm those things, it doesn't matter. And in fact, have worked with teachers who say, "Well, I care about my students. That's why I'm so hard on them. I care about my students. That's why I have high expectations." And I say, they're not perceiving that as caring. So we have to talk again and again and again about how that perception makes all the difference. And so that if they don't see or believe or feel fill in the blank, it doesn't matter. So, how is it that you do things to help them perceive you as credible?
Right. So when we're cultivating this credibility, not only is it going to help with how students perceive us, it's also going to help with our instruction as well, because we're going to figure out kind of our strengths and weaknesses um, as a teacher. I think you and I both know we're stronger in some areas and weaker in others, and we have to kind of support those weaker areas to make sure that we are being the best teacher we can be. But before we get to that, let's just talk about in general, what is teacher credibility? Let's define that for the listeners.
Okay, well, if you'd asked me a couple years ago, I'd have said they're credible.
They're accountable, they're punctual, right? Yeah.
So this is a fairly new term, and it's actually the term that our favorite meta researcher, John Hattie, uses. And he says credibility is made up of four components: trust, dynamism, immediacy, and competence.
Okay,
And
say that one more time.
I absolutely, I say it in my sleep sometimes.
I
It is trust, dynamism, immediacy, and competence.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah, and it made perfect sense to me when I heard how he defined teacher credibility. And in fact, it made it easier for me to understand things that for many years I couldn't put my finger on about what made some teachers better than others. And then, like you said a couple minutes ago, all of us want to be credible, and most of us have one or two of those areas, those aspects of credibility where we are particularly strong. But to truly get the most out of credibility, we have to be strong in all four. And for some people, that is really asking them to go out of their comfort zone and to stretch in ways where they might not be particularly comfortable.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, do you remember the effect size for teacher credibility, by the way?
I know it's really high.
It's really high. So, the
It's in
effect,
so an effect size, we're talking about Hattie's effect size, correct? So John Hattie's barometer of influence, he's got effect sizes. Anything above a point 0.4 we know is more bang for your buck. It's obviously your high yield strategies. I want to say it's like a one point something.
it is. And remember at that point four, that hinge point for Hattie, we are likely to see about a year's worth of academic growth in students. So that point four, right, and that's the minimum that we want. So point four. So you are really close, my friend. Dr. Hattie puts the effect size of teacher credibility as, wait for it, 1.09.
So if you're credible and your students perceive you as credible in these four areas, that's affecting their learning.
That's correct. And it could, if done consistently and correctly and all of that, give them about 2.5 years worth of possible growth. And
Really could bridge the gap for them as far as maybe having a teacher a few years ago that maybe they didn't learn quite as much from, so now they're a little bit behind, because we all know that students come to us on grade level, right?
correct, correct, right. Yeah, that always happens.
That always happens. They're right where we need them to
Right
be.
where they need to be or ahead.
No, we're obviously being sarcastic, but I think that's huge, that they can just being credible and being perceived as credible in those four areas um, is enormous. That impact is huge.
Right. Well, And honestly, and this is Wendy, not necessarily research based, but I have pretty good instincts. Are students who don't do well, are students who possibly have had teachers in the past who weren't as good as they needed to be, and so the student fell behind. They are hungry for a credible teacher, hungry. And so beyond, oh, how am I going to teach you about fractions because you didn't understand them last year? Okay, fractions are down the road. Let me convince you that I'm credible. Then we can go to work on fractions or writing an essay or understanding how to form improved hypotheses. Anything like that will come after the credibility is well established.
And it's not like you can't get better at these areas.
Oh, absolutely.
Let's talk about like, okay, first of all, let's say them again, because I know people might be in their car, they might be listening to this while they're cleaning their house, they don't have pen and paper, but let's just say it one more time.
Absolutely. Trust, and I'll do a dramatic pause in between. Trust, dynamism, immediacy, and competence.
And so for me, I'm really strong in, I think, competence and immediacy. I can have a good amount of dynamism, but it really does kind of depend on my mood. Trust, um, right? Trust was always hard for me because I think they trusted me enough because I had a good amount of the other three.
Mhm.
But I really did struggle with them being like I wasn't the teacher that was very touchy-feely lovey, which doesn't mean you don't need to have that for trust. But I felt like I that was something that I definitely lacked.
So we need to remember that these are kind of soft skills, but there are ways that we can strengthen them and improve them. I I it's interesting how similar we all are here, but also how different. So I had really strong trust, really strong dynamism, pretty good immediacy, but I'm not sure about my competence. So that's probably the area where I've had to work on the most. But I like what you said. Trust doesn't have to be about, oh, we're going to greet each other with hugs today and the same. In the same way that dynamism doesn't have to be about breaking into a Broadway musical.
Right. So let's discuss those. Let's break it down. Let's break down the 4 components. And then like what's one strategy that a teacher can use like tomorrow to boost like, their credibility in each area?
Well, first, let me remind you that there are things that you can do tomorrow, but like almost everything else, it takes practice.
Well, and almost a couple quarters sometimes for me
Well,
it took.
yeah. Well, when we think about building habits and things like that, they don't come overnight. So you have to make some kind of a conscious effort. And I always told teachers to put like notes in their classrooms or little mini posters to themselves that would
Yeah.
remind them of things they needed to do. The kids most of the time didn't even notice them. And so they just would remind me or they'd remind the teacher what they needed to do.
Oh my gosh, you just reminded me. I'm going to interrupt you.
Okay.
When my first 2 years of teaching, I had a little Post-it note and it didn't say anything on it, but it was at the back of the classroom and no one ever noticed it was there. But I had it there to remind me to not look at the Post-it note, but to look at the kids.
Ah,
Because I was nervous because, I was 22 and I was teaching high school kids and
right.
I would have a hard time making eye contact with them as I was teaching at first, and I would always want to drift and talk to the back of the wall
Yep.
because it seemed a lot easier. So every time I drifted to the back of that wall and I saw that Post-it note, it was like that mental reminder, like, no, no, bring it back down, make eye contact with your kids until it became a habit.
Right. And something as simple as that makes a difference. So you don't have to go, I'm going to start tomorrow being a credible teacher. Pick one area and figure out something specific to do and work on that. Some things then will naturally fall into place. So you asked me to break it down, which made me do a little dance here. Um, I am going to break it down first by talking about trust and immediacy, because those are parts of credibility that I consider relationship focused.
Right. And we need to build those
Well,
obviously first.
and almost all of us know that that's important. Almost all of us acknowledge that that's important. But we don't like, okay, how do I build a relationship? And so you have a lot of kids, and is it about, I'm going to talk to you about your football game last night? It could be, but there's more. So let's start with trust. Um, in the context of a classroom, this is not much different than in the context of your life, how important trust is. So if you have a spouse or a significant other, think about that person and what would happen, or if that person has actually betrayed your trust in some way. How hard is that to earn back? If a friend has betrayed you, how long does it take for you to be able to trust them again? And so we need to remember that in the classroom. When we do things, even little things to betray students' trust, um, they won't work as hard for us. They won't be willing to take chances in the classroom. And so we have to establish that we are trustworthy. We also have to remember that we might be one of the only trustworthy people in their lives, and that they may have faced betrayal that makes them hesitant to trust us. In my classroom, I always use the word benevolent. In fact, I told students I was a benevolent dictator, and benevolent was, in fact, our first vocabulary word of the year. And if you talk to any of my former students and think how old they are now, especially from those first couple of years teaching, they would say, oh, yeah, she talked about benevolent. So I equate benevolence with trust, because benevolent includes synonyms like compassionate, kind hearted, humane, generous. I mean, those are big words, those are lofty words, but the students must know the core element of benevolence is that I always have your best interests at heart. I will never do anything to put you in danger emotionally or physically. I am a trustworthy person. And so, really, just like in our regular relationships, the easiest way to build this is to never break your promises. Don't say things that you can't follow through on. I see teachers all the time say to kids, oh, we'll have a pizza party on Friday if you do this today. And then it doesn't come through. And the kids are like, why should I believe you? If you say to students, if I hear one more person shout out, we're going to have to stop the lesson, and then five more people shout out and you're still droning on, they don't trust you. Your, your word has to be absolutely gold. Now, none of us is perfect. We all mess up. When you mess up, what have you got to do? You got to own it. So, how many times have I said to a group of kids or an individual student, actually, I messed up. I remember I got after a kid one day and he really didn't deserve it. As soon as I realized that, I pulled him aside privately and I apologized. I said, I am so sorry that I called you out before I really understood the situation. That was not right of me, and I hope that you can forgive me. And I will not do that again. Are we going to be able to go on? He was stunned. He was stunned that a teacher was apologizing to him. But when we apologize, when we can't do what we said that we would do, or when we misunderstand something, it is very powerful as far as building up trust.
Even when it's about your competence.
Oh,
I
right,
remember being just kind of thrown into being an AP language teacher. And it was only my third year teaching. I had no idea what the curriculum was. And those kids, I mean, I would come in sometimes and be like, okay, so I did some research last night, or I talked to this colleague, and that lesson yesterday, we just need to erase that from our brains because I taught that completely incorrectly. Those kids gave me so much grace and we laughed it off. And I said, I'm sorry I wasted that time of ours. But honestly, I thought I was doing it correctly. But now that I've seen other ways of doing it, I think this way is better and we need to go with this route. And it built they trusted me because they knew that I had their best interest at heart, and I wasn't afraid to tell them when I messed up.
right. And that it's funny because it seems like a dichotomy. Like I ought to be competent, I have to think I know everything about everything. But
Right.
no, they need to know that you're competent. They also need to know that you're human. So, a brief story. I was working, this was several years ago, working with a teacher here in Gilbert, a sixth grade teacher, and she decided that she wanted to do a lesson like I had done, that I had shown her. And so she went, not only did she go in her classroom to teach it, but she invited her principal in to watch because she was so convinced it was going to be the most stellar lesson she'd ever delivered. Well, it was not only not stellar, it was bad. And there she was. And her principal, luckily, had built credibility because he was like, I'm just proud that you took a risk. Uh, this is not a problem. I see what you were trying to do. Nope, it didn't work, but I get it. And this teacher said to her sixth graders, that lesson just didn't work the way I'd planned for it to work. You didn't learn what I needed you to learn. So I'm going to go home this weekend and redo it. She went back in on Monday. She retooled the lesson, very honest with the kids about it, and very honest when it was over. Was that better? What made that lesson better? Do you understand this concept now? And that had to build up so much credibility for her,
Oh,
so trust
yeah.
because of that. And I want to bring up one more thing before we leave trust, if I could. And some teachers might not like this. So if you're like not sitting down, now might be a good time to sit down or hold on to the arms of your chair or something like that. Um, we need to be careful about not always looking for negative behavior.
Yeah.
And I, again, in my 35 years, I've been in classrooms where it feels like all the teacher is doing is redirecting kids' behavior. On the other hand, and this is where teachers might not like me very much, so you can edit this out if you want, Miss Bingold. Um, I see teachers say that they become praise junkies because they don't want to go to the negative. So I'll be in a classroom and it sounds like this. I like how you sat down, Johnny. Susie, thank you for being quiet. Jimmy, I like how you entered the classroom. Sally, good job. I'm like, what? What? They have just done the most basic of what we want them to do. And it's telling them how wonderful they're doing. Theoretically, it's also to tell Billy, who's talking, don't you want to be like whatever kid I said was quiet, Susie? Don't you want to be like Susie? And it doesn't work. Stop.
It doesn't. Mm-mm.
Stop. And first of all, I think if we added up the time that the teacher spends saying, good job, Sally, nice entering, Johnny, we could probably put in a whole new unit of study.
Well, we could teach them a lot about social emotional learning and how to be honest and sincere and all those things that would help them do those things naturally all on their own anyway.
Right, and you know what occurred to me? If if I walked into my job every day and my boss said to me, "Good working job this morning, Wendy," or "Thanks for being on time," or "I'm so glad you showed up," or "We really appreciate it when you wear proper work clothes." I mean, I would be like, "Why is she telling me this?" Especially when I'm quiet every day, not quiet every day. I park correctly every day. I wear appropriate clothing every day. I am always on time. Why is she telling me this stuff?
Hmm. Well, and it's research proven that praise that's not directly connected to their work
Hmm.
can seem very empty if it's overused. So, and that's hard. It's hard because we've been kind of taught to sandwich stuff, like praise, negative praise. But
No, no, no.
I don't think we need to do that anymore. I don't think that builds the trust, and I think it makes you seem insincere.
Right. Well, we need to focus on true and honest feedback. And the other thing is if Johnny is out of control, don't tell Susie how good she's being. Tell Johnny he's out of control. That will build trust not only with Johnny, but with all the other kids. So it's a balance, like almost everything in life, it's a balance. Um, with this honesty and the sincerity, but kids kids can hear how silly it sounds when we're doing that praise that we hear so often. Focus on feedback. Expect what you have set out for them to do. Don't keep praising it over and over, especially for the most basic things. That will establish your credibility with the
I
trust.
love that. So immediacy is our next one, right? And I love this. I love the word immediacy but there's so much wrapped up in it.
Oh, there is so much wrapped up in it, and I hope to address a couple different aspects of it. Um, so I love the word too, and it should make you think of the word immediate. It means that you are available and accessible for kids. Now, I think most teachers would probably say, "Well, of course I am. What am I supposed to do? Give them my home phone number for a night?" That's not what it's talking about. It's talking about not only are you physically available for them, but you are mentally and emotionally available for them. One of the things that I learned and then began changing many years ago, kids would come up to me to ask a question, and maybe I was at the back of the room sorting some papers, or maybe I was on my computer taking roll or whatever, and I would keep doing what I was doing while they were asking me a question. I was not available to them. I needed to stop what I was doing, turn to them, make eye contact, and be immediate for them. Now, this doesn't mean that I didn't say to students, right now I need to take roll, email a parent, whatever. I will
But you address the fact that, hey, like right now I
right,
can't.
I will be with you within 2 minutes. That's fine.
Right.
But it's when they're not important enough for you to stop what you're doing. Frankly, I use this with colleagues and I learned it from my mom. Everybody deserves your full attention, even when it's not convenient for you. And that is so much a part of immediacy to truly be there. Mindfulness, of course, is all the rage right now. This could also be related to mindlessness, not mindfulness, mindfulness. It also, so you mentioned just a minute ago about how immediacy means multiple things, and it also means truly getting to know students. Now, secondary teachers struggle with this more than elementary because of sheer numbers. So I always say, "I have 150 students, or I have 170 students." And I always say, uh-huh,
I know, like, you just want to stop and be like, "Yep, that's a true statement."
yep, that's correct. And I had that many students. Yes, you have to get to know each one. Of course, the reality is you will know some more than others, but you can't just toss up your arms and say, well, I know half of them really well, the other half not so much. You got to keep chipping away at that other half. Um, every single student at every single,
Especially online right now. I mean,
oh, yes.
oh, it's so
Even,
important.
and I used to do this with surveys way before Google Forms, where I could get to know some of their likes and dislikes. And then I made specific goals to talk to those students. Like, I don't feel like I know Susie very well. So I'm going to look at Susie's information sheet and have a goal today or tomorrow to say, hey, Susie, I noticed that you like musical theater too, and chat. Um, I also think that it gives such a negative message to students when they see that we're not making any kind of effort to get to know them. And yes, it takes time. And yes, with so much being online, that's very difficult. But this is too important to say, well, I have too few students, or well, I can't do it if we're online, or, well, we're in the midst of a pandemic. Use that for everything. This is just far, far, far too important.
And I think that's something that the kids need more than anything right now. And so even if you just pull in a few students to chat before the
Yeah,
rest of the class comes in and or hold a few back after the class is over just to chat and say hi and maybe pull some information off those Google surveys and or just have like little like round table conversations about whatever.
right.
I think that would mean a lot to students. I loved that some of our teachers do lunches together, where they're all on Zoom and they're all eating lunch together and the kids are just allowed to just, unmute and talk to their classmates. Like, and it's insane, but let them be insane for 15-minute lunch or whatever, and then you can say, okay, now I'm going to mute everybody or make sure everybody eats. But they need that connection, even though it is via a screen, to each other and to you. Yeah.
This credibility has a lot of work in the front loading of it. Once you've established it, unless you really mess up,
Right.
you're usually pretty good. It doesn't take as long to maintain it. Again, think about a significant relationship or a significant friendship. At first you're sending flowers and writing notes and texting all the time. And then after that's been established, it can settle down a bit. It's the classroom. So I want to mention another aspect of immediacy that we talk about all the time, and Britt, you're the queen of. Immediacy means to make students know and understand that what they're doing is important and exciting and relevant, and pertinent, all of that. And in fact, we instill a sense of urgency. Now, seriously, when I go in those classrooms where I'm bored to tears, most of the time it's because there is no urgency. So I'm going to exaggerate because I like hyperbole. But I go in and the teacher will say, okay, I need you to write your name at the top of your paper. You have the next 30 minutes to do it. I'm like, no, 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 no. Tell them they have 30 seconds. If they need more time than that, you can say, oh, you've been working pretty hard. Let me give you another 15 seconds to finish that up. But there's no urgency in that. Kids immediately know that this is going to take me about 30 seconds. She gave me 30 minutes. That's about 29 and a half minutes I can have to swing from the tiles on the ceiling and bother the kids around me and ask to go to the bathroom. And no, we have a lot to do and we are moving it along. You mentioned earlier, we want kids to have a teeny tiny little bit of anxiety. No vomiting, no hives, no anything, no tears. But that's not what I see in classrooms. I see kids who are like lounging
Yes.
around because there's just no sense of urgency. So again, this is another
Right.
place where we have to find balance, but we have to let kids know I have so much to teach you and it is so important, but we got to move along. You got to pay attention and you got to trust me. So see how those go together, that immediacy and the trust.
Absolutely. Yeah, and we talked about, I mean, yeah, urgency is something I'm really um, immediacy is something I'm really passionate about, but urgency also, yeah, we're not there to stress the kids out, but we're also not there to let them just think they can just do whatever they want in the class. And I think timers are a great way to do this.
Yeah,
And I always allow less time than I
absolutely.
think they'll need, and because you can always add more time. But like you said, if you give them 30 minutes to do a group worksheet, they're going to have that done in like maybe 5 to 10 minutes, and then they're going to be crazy. So, like, you need to just move it along. And I think it does take some practice, and you have to kind of know your kids in your class and what the activity is. And you get better as it as you teach, as the years go by, you kind of know what things are going to take about how long or whatever. But give them that less time. Like, I think if teachers did that more, the students be like, oh, we really, but you have to, again, you've got to, you, like, this goes with trust. You have to hold to that. Like when that timer goes off, you have to be like, and I'm collecting so I can go over your answers, or whatever it is. Because if they think for a second that you're going to just keep giving them another 30 minutes, that timer is completely, null and void.
So let me remind teachers out there, we need to have students working on things that don't necessarily have to get done. They have to have had the practice that they need. You all know what happens if you wait for every kid to get done with something. Oh my word. So, if you've taken any of my classes, I will often say, here's what I need you to do right now, but don't stress if you don't get it done.
Right.
So, right.
Yep. There's totally a balance, right? And each class might be different.
Oh, absolutely.
You might have one year where your kids are like, they need that pressure. Um, and then the next year you start off and that group is like, whoa, whoa. And you're like, oh, you're gonna do it. Okay, I don't need to put that much pressure on you. And that could be for high school kids. As a secondary teacher, that was hour from hour to me. I mean, I knew exactly first hour was asleep, so I really needed to put the pressure on a little bit more to kind of wake them up. But by the time I got to sixth hour, the pressure needed to be on because I needed to calm them down. But in the middle of the day, they were pretty good.
Right. Well, and sometimes it's student to student. If I had very anxious kids, I would individually pull them aside and say, I am in no way meaning to add to your anxiety. Please know whatever you get done, you get done. It'll be okay. And then again, I was building trust with them.
Right. Yep. And so it's tricky. Like you said,
Yes.
you got to allow yourself some grace, like, and work towards that balance. But yeah, I think if you establish that trust and then move into a more urgent classroom, and more immediacy, the kids are going to start to think, oh my gosh, this teacher cares about me as a person, but they also really care that I learn.
Right.
And so I really got to make sure that I am on task and doing what they're asking me to do, because they're not giving me busy work. They're not giving me things I don't need to have, but they are telling me I need to get them done. Okay. So the next one's dynamism, which I think is fun to say.
Well, yeah, it is fun to say, and it's my personal favorite because it's what made teaching enjoyable for me. Um, it to me is what next to trust is what made students want to come to my classroom. So when I think of dynamism, I think of synonyms like passion and enthusiasm and energy. And all of that is true. And when I teach my dynamism class, I put a quote out by Gail Godwin. And she says that good teaching is one quarter preparation and 3/4 pure theater. So the actress in me is like, it is all about theater. It is all about theater. Um, I put out far more energy when I teach than I actually am feeling naturally.
Yeah, me too.
Um, I used to say things to students like, we're going to learn about active versus passive voice today. This could change your life. You see, I don't really feel that way. That active voice versus passive voice is like the be all and end all. But the students at that moment thought so. Sometimes they would say, I thought you told us that reading the Odyssey was going to be that. I know, I know, I know. I just get so excited. And pretty soon, my excitement bled to them, and they were excited. Kids who never thought they would like writing or Romeo and Juliet or, um, learning about active versus passive voice were like, oh, yeah, this is so cool. I'm like, okay, I got him.
Uh-huh. Oh yeah, tell me about it. When the AP kids were excited to find rhetorical devices and know what they meant and why an author used them, they were like
Right.
totally geeking out, and I'm like, my job here is
Oh
done.
my God. It is fun. Exactly. I we probably don't have time for this little story, but one night after an open house, I went out to like a happy hour with my colleagues, and one of my former students was there all by himself, sitting at the bar. Not one of my better students, by the way. When he saw me, he came immediately over and wanted to talk to me. And he particularly wanted to talk about Pip in Great Expectations. I just kept thinking, I mean, this kid was not like 18. He was like 25 now and not a great
Right.
student. But I had been so excited about Great Expectations, trying to make us so relevant that that's what he wanted to talk to me about. He wanted also to make sure I was still teaching it. And unfortunately, I wasn't anymore. But you got to be even more excited than you actually are, I guess. Now,
Well, and what they're giving you, because they're not going to give you a whole lot until you kind of bring it up a notch. And then usually they'll start to meet you, but yeah, at first they're going to test the waters and see who you are and what you're about for sure.
absolutely no kid comes in going, I have waited my whole life to learn about the active voice. No,
Right.
no kid. I mean, my top students have never said that to me. So you have to convince them that whatever you're doing is absolutely the greatest. Your enthusiasm has to be contagious. Now, I know I'm a mind reader, and I know there are listeners out there right now saying, this is just not me. I
Hmm.
can't do this. I'm not the dynamic type. So, one thing, well, two things. First, dynamism looks different ways. And I often think about the great teacher, Mr. Rogers,
Hmm.
who was calm and quiet and stable. But who can deny his energy? Who can deny that twinkle in his eyes that said whatever he was teaching was important and valuable? So your dynamism doesn't equal my dynamism, but there is dynamism.
Hmm. You just got to find it in yourself and what that works for you.
But here's where again, the closer I get to retirement, the more often I say controversial things, I guess. Um, if you are a teacher and you say, I don't want to be dynamic, or I won't be dynamic, or I don't think being dynamic is part of my job, I truly do have an issue with that. It would be like saying I want to star in musical theater, but I really don't want to have to sing and dance. Okay.
It's part of the job, right? Yeah.
Right, or we're in the playoffs in football season, and yes, I really want to be the quarterback, but throwing just not my thing. Okay, I
Yeah,
don't
it's too
care.
hard on my arm.
Right, right. So when people say, I'm just not dynamic, I'm like, then you either need to get dynamic or you need to go into a profession like calling people about their car warranty. I don't, dynamism is in fact part of the job. So teachers will say, well, how do I do this? Right? How do I do this? Because I don't always feel dynamic and energetic.
No, there's days where we walk into the classroom and we've had a lot of stuff going on, and we're like, okay, I gotta flip this switch.
Right? I'm tired or I'm sad or I'm
Yeah.
worried. So I almost always listen to music. Whatever songs are going to pump me up that day. And I listen and I dance and I move, not in front of anybody, but it helps me. If you've taken my classes, I often do that before I come in to teach you. We know that our brain affects our body, but our body affects our brain. So if you stand up straight, put those shoulders back, head up, sparkle in the eyes, even if you don't feel it, and you put that bounce in your step, that body will actually begin to affect your brain. If you put your body in that position, your brain actually becomes convinced that you are happy and energetic. And it's miraculous. So yeah, you're not dynamic. Okay, stand up, shoulders back, head up, put that sparkle in the eyes. You know how many teachers don't even smile in front of their kids? Smile. Write a note to yourself that says smile.
Or put a Post-it note in the back of the room, and that one that will remind you to smile.
Exactly. All of those things will increase your dynamism. And if you're not naturally dynamic, there are those specific ways to work on it. It will make a huge difference with your students.
Huge. I mean, my students would always ask, they're just like, how do you are why are you always so happy? And I'm like, oh, I'm not always happy.
Right.
Like, what are you talking about? They're like, well, you're always happy when you're around us. And I'm like, well, I love my job, but like I'm human. Like I have moments of, not like where I'm like, woo, let's just, and but yes, in front of them, they
Oh, yeah.
for whatever because I put on that persona for whatever that day was, that teaching persona, they were like, "You always were happy to see me." And that made all the difference. And I was like, "Great." I'm so glad.
That is our job. That is our job. To be happy to see them, to be excited about whatever it is that we're teaching. Um, that is one way that we do this job successfully.
Well, and it's hard as a teacher when things are just going awry with your profession to feel like that. Like, hey, you're going to teach in a pandemic. Hey, we're going to do hybrid. Hey, we're going to do virtual. Like, and as a teacher, you're feeling pulled in so many different directions. And am I respected? Am I valued? And that has nothing to do with your kids.
Right.
That your kids still need you. And if you came into this profession because you love doing what you're doing, hopefully, sometimes we have to just stand up and smile and laugh with them, and then all of a sudden our brain will click and we're happy.
I'm really happy you mentioned laughing. We should be laughing more right now than ever. So if
Yes.
this people say, "Oh, this is not the time to laugh." Well, obviously there are inappropriate laughing times,
Yes.
but if we don't laugh right now, we will not survive this. And we have to laugh. There's a great quote, but I don't remember it, about laughing with your students. I use it, I think, in my dynamism class. Um, it it is part of our job. And like you said, yes, we're in, I'm so tired of this word, unprecedented times. Uh,
Right.
However, our job is still to teach kids. And part of teaching kids is to smile and be happy and be enthusiastic and to
And
raise.
my favorite thing was when they would be working on something and I would be chatting with a kid, and something would happen and I would just it was like we would just start laughing, and it was like that embarrassing, like you can't, like you get the giggles and you just can't stop laughter. And those were some of my favorite moments of teaching, because it just was joy. It was pure joy in the middle of learning, and I think kids love to see that.
Well, some of you probably don't even know what an overhead projector screen is. But for most of my career, I had one. Sometimes I would get so tickled about something and start laughing so hard that I would hide behind my projector screen.
Oh my gosh,
Um,
I would do the same thing, because you're like, okay, I have to keep it together. I'm supposed to be
uh,
professional right now.
but the kids would know that I was back there dying, and they loved it. They
Oh yeah.
loved it. They loved that I could get so tickled about something that happened. It wasn't like somebody told a joke. It's just those fun and funny things. There's
Yeah, those things that just happen in class that you're like, that was completely not what I anticipated
right, right,
at all
yeah,
when I woke up this morning.
right.
Because that's the best part about teaching, is every day you really, really don't know what's going to
Oh yeah,
happen.
oh yeah. That's that little risk taker in all of us.
Yeah,
So
for sure, for sure.
there is one more area, competence.
Yep.
So we did trust, immediacy, dynamism, and now competence.
Mm-hmm.
Competence in so many ways is everything combined. You might remember, I haven't seen them lately, but they're AT&T commercials that end with just okay is not okay.
Right.
Now, yeah, I'm going to whisper, in a pandemic, sometimes just okay is just fine. Whatever you need to do to survive. But mostly just okay is not okay when it comes to being a teacher. Like, Wendy and Brit, this whole teacher credibility, dynamism, immediacy, it's just not my thing. Then you're in the wrong profession. Then you are willing to be just okay. And so, it's like if I went in to get my gallbladder out as an emergency, which I did, and the surgeon, whom I did not know, came in and said, I always get kind of confused between the gallbladder and the appendix, but I'll figure it out when I'm in there.
Right.
No, we're not figuring it out when you're in there, or the guy who's going to fix your brakes, and he's like, oh, I don't remember how I'm supposed to do that exactly, but it'll probably come back to me when I'm under the hood. No, 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 no. It's the same with teaching, and what we do is every bit as important as a mechanic or a surgeon. Um, you must know your content. And yeah, we're there to, this is embarrassing, but in my first couple of years teaching vocabulary, I didn't know the words and I mispronounced them. One
Mm-hmm.
did that so sweetly. My mom and dad said that that's not exactly how you pronounce that. I was like, oh no. And so you do what you did, what you talked about a couple of minutes ago. You know what, you guys, I mispronounced this word. Let's take a step back and figure it out together.
Right.
That's fine. But you have to know your content, which most teachers do. But you also have to know pedagogy. Students need to believe that their teachers know how to teach them.
Oh, say it again.
Oh, students need to know. They need to believe. They need to perceive that teachers know how to teach them.
So it's not even about, hey, I know Shakespeare or I know algebra 2. It's, I know how to teach you algebra 2.
Correct. So, and they assume, students and parents assume that if you're a math teacher, you know math. That if you're an ELA teacher, you know about reading and writing. And if you're a science teacher, blah, blah, blah. There is a basic assumption there. But they also assume that you know how to teach. And if they begin to see that you don't really, and that's because you come in every day and lecture, or you appear to be unprepared, um, they will begin to believe that you are not competent, and therefore they will stop trusting you. They
Well, they'll
will.
just shut down.
Oh yeah. Um, Hattie actually says that if students don't perceive a teacher as credible, they turn off. When I go into a classroom and the kids are asleep or doing their own thing, immediately I know this teacher is lacking credibility because the students have just gone, this isn't worth it. This teacher is not credible. I don't trust the teacher. The teacher's not dynamic. The teacher doesn't care about who I am. The teacher doesn't know how to teach me. And it's like flipping a switch. They turn it off, but it is not easy to get back on again. So the teacher has to have a plan for the day that students understand pretty much what's going to happen. And also, students, for a teacher to prove his or her competence, students need to see that the teacher has multiple ways to teach me. And if one way doesn't work, the teacher has something else in his or her toolbox to help that student.
Right. Or has enough vulnerability to say, let's Google that
Right.
because I don't know. Like I remember kneeling down next to a kid and he's like, this whole thing that you're talking about right now is just not clicking. And I'm like, we have the internet now. Let's use our resources. And I don't do that all the time, but yes, I'm the expert in the room, but I don't know everything all the time.
Right.
But I will do my darndest if I don't have it in my toolbox to find it out for you. And that was a strategy that I think shocked my student because he was like, "Oh," and I'm like, like we have Google, let's Google it."
So, so first of all, I love vulnerability, and Brene Brown, I believe, is the queen of vulnerability. Um,
Yes.
Vulnerability is a way to establish trust with students. It doesn't mean that you lay out all of your dark and dirty secrets in front of
N-
them, but
No.
that's bad. That gets you fired. But to say to a student, "Oh, I don't know. Let's check the internet."
Yeah,
That
can someone ask Surrey because Surrey probably knows.
right. And that is absolutely okay. You're expected to be the expert in the room, but like you said, that doesn't mean that you know everything. We're also, when you told that story, you're also modeling for kids how they can say, yeah, I probably should know this, but I don't. What do I need to do now?
And it's human. And now once we've learned it, we know it. I'd always look at the kid and be like, look, we both learned something new today. I'm so excited. Like, and now I know it for the rest of my other classes.
Right. And now we know how to find things that we don't know about, and how we
Well,
know.
and even searching the internet, like they would always want to pick the first two things. And I'm like, ooh, not credible sources. Let's look for like better examples. And so you're just even modeling like a research process as well. So there's so many things you can do that kids need to know for life.
Right.
Yeah.
All of that establishes competence. And then when we put all of these together, let me say them one more time for the people still not paying attention or driving or dealing with little kids. Teacher credibility, according to John Hattie, is trust, immediacy, dynamism, and competence. We have to synthesize those four things, despite where we're strong and where we're weak. We have to try to balance them out, synthesize them for students to see the effects of teacher credibility. Remember, 1.09. I mean, that's just like off the charts.
Well, and to remember that it's okay to not be strong in all of the areas right away. You probably already are strong in at least one, probably two of the areas.
Correct.
So just trying to add in and that is really what we see the most as the management issue. The students look at you like you're not credible. Why should I listen to you?
At least at a place. where they can assign credibility to you. Kids are forgiving, but you have to prove your credibility to them. But there are so many ways to put that puzzle together that, just like you said a minute ago, Britt, if you know you're really good in a particular area, awesome, maintain that. But see
Hmm.
what you can do to increase the other area.
For sure. And I think one of the main ways we can do that, and I think this is my last question for you, and then we'll wrap up. But I think highly credible teachers cannot reach their full potential in these areas without a collective group of other teachers there to help support them. Do you believe the statement? I mean, what do you think? I mean, because I feel like you have helped me become more dynamic, and you've helped me with my trust, you know what I mean, where Julia really helps me with my competence. Immediacy was a natural thing for me as a teacher. I just that was very natural. But if I didn't have my people, my PLC, those my group, my groupies, my teacher tribe, what I wouldn't, I would have a hard time figuring out how to do this.
Well, when you just asked me this question, my heart started racing a little bit. So I'm going to make a confession, as long as you will absolve me as soon as I'm done with my confession.
Okay.
So I'm an introvert, which surprises people. And that doesn't mean I'm shy. It means that people drain my energy as opposed to increase my energy.
Mhm.
But you're an extrovert, so
Yes.
people give you energy. And
Mhm.
so I'm kind of a lone wolf. And so for most of my teaching career, I just got to go in my classroom and do whatever I wanted. When we would have a department meeting, it would be about things like, next Tuesday's picture day, here's your schedule. And then all of a sudden, the last probably 8 years of my career, this thing called PLCs came in. And I learned that I was going to have to, like, actually sit with my grade level team, and we would be planning together and looking at data together, and I
Which
didn't
just
want
was scary, yeah.
well, and I didn't want to, because I was by far the oldest, by far the most experienced, and hello, I'm an introvert. If I wanted to hang out with these people, I would have already been doing it. And so I did it. I did it with a good attitude, because that's how my parents raised me, but I didn't want to. And then when I went to work at the county, at Maricopa County Educational Services Agency, I found out that we had to actually build our professional development with a committee. I'm like, no, no. I build my professional development by sitting by myself with my computer. And then when I was hired for this job, and I was told we were going to hire another person, I'm like, oh, dang. I just want to be by myself.
Yes,
And
I understand, yeah.
yeah, and so I guess what I can tell you is that even though I was dragged kicking and screaming into PLCs, and developing PD by committee, and frankly having you and Britt here in my office, notice I called it my office. Ultimately, this is where I have seen the most growth in me as a teacher and as a professional. I wouldn't trade those experiences for anything. Therefore, making the leap, yes, I think that to reach your highest potential as an educator, you have to be with a group of other teachers who are going to help you with your credibility, who are going to praise you where you are strong, and learn from you where you are strong, but then give you help uh, to shore up where it is that you are weak. What we really want is every single student to have a rock star teacher. That will never happen unless teachers are working together collectively to make sure that everybody is, in fact, a rock star teacher in all areas, but particularly with teacher credibility.
Right. And we know that that's the number one on Hattie's list right now, right? It's
Actually,
collective.
collective teacher efficacy, which
Yeah.
means
Oh, wait, number one is different now, right? Student estimates of achievement.
where so what it means, sorry, you're right. What it means is that a group of teachers believe not only believes that students can learn, but believes that they have the
Right.
impact to help those students learn. And so we have to be working together, saying these are all our kids. I might not be the most dynamic person, so Britt, help me with that. What could I do to be more dynamic? Um, Julia, I'm not sure that I'm particularly immediate with my students, but you seem to be. We have to be working together with that collective commitment, that collective group of teachers to be at our best. And again, I went in kicking and screaming, but those have been the times in my life where I've had the most professional growth by far.
Well, and I think a lot of teachers are going to relate to that because a lot of teachers went into PLCs and whatever you call them, data teams or
Yeah,
kicking and screaming. I mean, I don't want to share my scores. I don't want to share my student products or work. I don't think it's hard to be vulnerable. It's hard to, um, sometimes if you feel judged or you feel shamed or whatever those things are, but if we could get past that, I think overall it's not only going to help you as a teacher, but it's ultimately going to create this environment where the students see their teachers as a team of respectful adults. And I think for them to be able to see that in adults is really important. Like a team of adults that respects each other so much and helps each other so much. I should really like. I think the students really do notice that, and they want to then say, okay, I can trust these people. These people are really credible. Yeah,
go on, I think we could go on for another hour just with that right there and how
I know. We need to wrap up, right?
think of how many teachers help us. I so admire how the three of you work together for the betterment of all of us. Do we hear that? Yes, all the time. And so it's the same for kids. Like, wow, these three teachers or six teachers are working together because they believe that I can learn and they're going to make it happen.
Yeah, and they're working together so that they're working smarter, not harder. And they're going to do that for me. They're going to make sure that I'm not doing busy work. They're going to make sure that I'm doing things and then we're using our time wisely. And I mean, kids know so much more than we give them credit for. They see so much more than we know they see. And so they're watching everything
They
all the
are.
time. And so modeling that, um, also gives you
I
credibility as
couldn't agree
well.
more. But then how often do you and I disagree?
Very,
Very
very
rarely.
rarely. Okay, let's wrap it up. Wendy, I just love talking to you. I could talk
We
to you
do
forever.
sometimes talk
But
forever.
if listeners, I know, and
Yeah.
sometimes we do talk forever. If listeners want more from you, where can they find you online?
I am on the Gilbert Professional Growth Facebook page. Um, I do actually have Instagram and maybe Twitter. I'm never on there, so don't try to find me there. I do have a Facebook page called Inspiring Instruction. If you're not a Gilbert teacher, you can find me there. But I'm also easily accessible through email, including my personal email, which is NANA stands for Nana. WSP stands for Wendy Sue Peterson at yahoo.com. So I am absolutely, if anybody is out there listening and you're like, oh, I really would like to talk to Wendy about this, I would love for you to reach out to me. As I mentioned from the get go, I'm passionate about um, creating, contributing to the very best teachers for our students. So it's always my honor to talk to anybody in education.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for coming on today and talking about how we can cultivate credibility with our students. And ultimately, that's going to impact them, like we said, hugely in their learning. And it's sometimes I don't think teachers link credibility to student learning, and they are completely linked and actually
Totally.
extremely effective.
Right,
So,
absolutely linked, and I'd like to thank you for having me on. I'm always jealous when you have other people on your podcast, so, just know that I will be on anytime, and, anybody who'd like to reach out, I'm ready uh, to visit about this very important topic.
yeah, and it is an important topic, and I think a lot of teachers. I mean, I didn't know about it until I learned about it through our department and our research. So that's why I wanted to have you on to talk about it.
We instinctively knew, but we didn't have research. Yes, for the terminology, correct.
Perfect. Yep. So, all right. Well, you have a lovely day, and thanks again. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you. Bye.
Thanks for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Learning Unlocked and finding out more about teacher credibility. If you have listened today as a GPS educator, you can receive PD recertification credit by visiting our Employee Hub page and navigating to professional growth and then digital PD courses. Just a reminder that we are on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at GPS Prof Growth. That's at GPS PROF GROWTH. For more information or resources from this episode, please visit our website at learningunlocked.libsyn.com/website. We are distributed by Libsyn to Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Audible, and Amazon Music. Episodes are also available on our PGD YouTube channel under playlists. Our intro and outro music are licensed from Melody Loops. Thanks again, key holders. Keep unlocking curiosity, creativity, and innovation with your students. I know times are tough right now, but so are you. So stay kind and courageous, and I'll see you next time.